Anyway, so I'm Matthew Jones. Apologies for the name thing. It's a peculiar piece that goes with this particular account. And I'm from your party in Glasgow. Obviously speaking on my own as for the Campaign for Mass Workers Party. Obviously, as comrades know, we're sitting in a position where now your party has actually elected a central executive committee, which always sounds like a sort of backstairs Stalinist meeting, and is supposed to be organising itself in order to move forward and have branches and stand in elections. However, none of that appears to be happening. So here to help us with this, navigate our way through the current situation and explain what's been going on. We have Sophie Wilson, who was elected from Yorkshire to the said CEC, and thanks very much to her. So she's going to start with a brief presentation, in terms of outlining what's happened with the two meetings that took place on Tuesday and then on this past Sunday, and people can then ask questions. Obviously, if you've got particular questions on this, because I think it's obviously a new thing in those terms. And I mean, I've seen various notes of those meetings, but certainly don't have a view of what's actually going on the atmosphere or any of that sort of stuff. So yeah, particular for people to ask questions at the start. So okay. Thanks, Sophie. We'll leave your presentation from the start then.
That's fine.
Could I just
go on,
say,
Nigel?
could I just say that I also wondered if Sophie at some point this evening might reflect on the way she sees things developing. I think that would be really helpful at some point. Thanks.
Great, thank you. I'd probably like to start with that because I don't want to bamboozle you all with a lot of facts about the meetings and the amendments. But the way I think I see things developing is definitely that, I know this is Campaign for a Mass Workers Party, which I believe in. And if we are going to get that, I think the way that's going to be achieved is through grassroots organising, membership, branches when we get them set up. I think that's really key. And people continuing to meet regionally or in tendencies, however they choose, as they have been doing. And I think that's where the real power lies going forward. And that's not to kind of take responsibility from me and onto you, but I do think that's where the power is, as always in this movement, now more than ever. And happy to answer questions on that after as well, Nigel. But that's the way I see it developing. And one of the key things is going to be getting those branches set up, but in the meantime, continuing to organise without those formal structures. And I think we've seen great examples of that up and down the country. So I'd really like that to continue and not get to not lose faith too much in each other and our own politics. But I'll go into kind of a recap of what's happened. I'm Sophie Wilson. I was elected on the Yorkshire seat for the CEC and I stood on the grassroots left slate. So if you're not aware of that, that's fine. I can fill you in via questions afterwards, and you can check that out online and the organisations that were involved in putting that slate together. That can be circulated. And also just to say, I'm not sure if comrades in the room have read it, but we did release a report collectively as the slate earlier today. And Naomi Wimborne Idrissi, who was not on the slate but was endorsed by the slate and is closely aligned to us, has also had her own report. One of the other independents, Sam Gorst, has put his own out as well. So I'm not sure if you've read those. I'm sure those can be circulated at a later time. I'm sorry in advance for how long that report was. I think the first bit is 19 pages, and after that there's 9 pages of appendix items. So I'm sorry for that in advance, but there was a lot circulated before this meeting, and I think we just wanted to be as transparent as possible and try to get ahead of questions before they come, so you've got as much information as you have. I'm sure not everybody in the room has had a chance to read all of that in its entirety, but we collectively wrote that and that is now published. And I think that's in my opinion, a fair and accurate account of the last meeting. So After we won the election, well, there was a couple of comrades. Obviously, grassroots left didn't win a majority on the CEC, but after the CEC elections, not much happened that weekend, and we were told, I think on the last Monday, we've got a meeting on Tuesday. That meeting on Tuesday was just an introductory meeting. I think that's a good idea. I think one of the things that we wanted out of that was some channels to communicate with each other, probably just a WhatsApp for now. And it seemed that those on the many slate weren't up for that. And I wish I could stop talking about it in terms of slates, but it does seem that everybody is voting in a block at the minute, and isn't relenting on that. So we've got no form of communication with each other. We had that introductory meeting. That was chaired by Jeremy Corbyn. On the agenda was a chair election, so there was a bit of a kerfuffle about that. It had originally been said it would be interim. During the meeting, it seemed like it wasn't going to be interim. We raised it. It seemed there was confusion, whether deliberate or otherwise. It seemed if we'd not raised the point, that would have been the election for the permanent chair of the CEC, which is one of the officer roles which is in the constitution. There's a couple more. Again, there's quite a bit more detail in the report. Sorry, I can just Sorry, I got muted by the host, it said.
Sorry.
Carry on. Is that okay?
Yeah, carry on. Sorry.
No problem.
Sorry.
No, sorry.
Carry on.
Carry on, sorry. Just mute everybody and start again. Sorry.
No, that's fine. Thank you for that. Where was I? Oh yeah, so no issue with there being a permanent chair. Obviously that had to happen. But the points that we raised were things like, we've not seen the standing orders, those haven't been passed yet. We haven't seen any remit to the chair. So how can we vote on a chair when we don't actually know what the chair's going to be doing? It's my opinion that a chair should probably be one of the worst roles, that one that you don't have, because it takes away your voice. And there's obviously an alternative view that the chair has or ends up with the most power. So we wanted to see that before we actually elected anybody. One of the other points was, we had about 30 seconds to introduce ourselves to each other. We don't actually know each other. If we're going to work together in a unified fashion, and make this party the best it can be, it would be far better to get to know one another beforehand. I know there was quite a lot of heated debate on Twitter. I stay off Twitter myself mostly, so I've only heard about some of it secondhand. But I think there was comments about the interim chair, which was Jen Forbes, has one of the other CEC members blocked on Twitter. Again, I'm not involved in any of this, but I do think it's a worry if you can't have a chair that can work with everybody, or can be a unifying presence, which is one of the, in my opinion, bare minimum things a chair has to be. So we did get that. That managed to get back to the original proposal. That was just the interim chair. And then we were told a few days later that the next meeting, which would be the full CEC meeting, would be held on the Sunday just gone. The interim chair invited agenda points. I'll be honest, I think we've dropped the ball a little bit on this because we didn't submit any motions for this. And that was because I was kind of taking it in good faith in the way that the chair had presented this, that it was going to be, a collectively decided agenda, and we'd talk about priorities going forward. And it was my hope that we'd get to co-create some of these documents, like the standing orders, and we'd talk about what our priorities for each thing is. It didn't happen. We were sent, I think, 36 pages less than 24 hours before the meetings. I think it was about 5 or 6 p.m. the night before. And many of us were, myself, I was travelling down to London the next day on the train at 9 o'clock. So we sent 36 pages of documents the night before. And then one was amended at about 11:30 at night. I was already asleep. So saw that in the morning. So during that day on the train, for most of us, we got some amendments in, and in that report I mentioned earlier, the amendments are listed in full, so you can see those in the appendix at the bottom. And most of them, well, in fact, all of them, were around democracy and healthy debate. And I'll cut to the chase that all of them lost. So there was just block voting throughout. Every single one lost. The meeting was, to be honest, and I hate coming to these meetings with kind of bad news or feeling like I'm slagging people off. But the meeting really was a shambles. The hybrid facility wasn't working. It had been scheduled for 2 hours, 45 minutes. We'd said from that initial Tuesday meeting, and then every time any of us had emailed in with any agenda points, that it needs to be a full day affair. We need a full day to discuss and debate and get through some of the most important topics, which obviously you can't do anything without the standing orders and the remit of the officer roles. You can't do anything without a code of conduct. And without those ground rules in place on how we actually have the debate. And then we wanted some of the really important debates about branch formation and local elections, and there were a couple more as well. But branch formation and local elections, absolutely top of the priorities, I think, for me personally. So they were voted down in their entirety. I would encourage you to read them. Some of them were things like in the... Let me just go back. Sorry, I've just finished cooking tea, so I'll just get them up so I don't repeat myself. 1 second. Frequency of meetings was one of them. Basically just trying to have it standardized when they would be and how long we would meet for. I don't think anybody was particularly set or fussed on how long that is. It has to be an appropriate amount, but I think we proposed a monthly meeting that'd be a day in length, and then weekly online meetings for 2 hours. Wasn't completely wedded to that. I think the point was we were wedded to at least having some set frequency of meetings. That was voted down, as they all were. We also had an amendment on notice for meetings to allow more planning for member schedules. Many of us have got caring responsibilities, myself included, and that was voted down. And up to that point, there'd not actually been any debate, and we were told that we can only have 30 seconds to present each amendment, and there'd be no for or against. It just went straight to the vote. And the other thing I'd like to point out is these amendments were not circulated in advance. They probably couldn't be, because a lot of these amendments, were submitted around midday, just before the meeting, a couple hours before the meeting, but they weren't printed out, and there was no time allowed to actually read through them, which was disappointing. So at that point, that's when we said, if you're voting against these, we'd really like to know why you're voting against them. We got a couple of answers at first, until I think the next one was one of the things that I put forward, which was around the accountability of the Secretariat, as the current staff are calling themselves. And this was around, so my idea was something that I think is pretty standard in the trade union movement and the labour movement, which many of us have been a part of, and it was to separate CEC meetings into sections. So it could be part 1, part 2, part 3. In one, it's perfectly acceptable to invite staff or people from other groups to attend and give presentations, but the actual debate and the voting happens in a closed meeting. And the idea behind that isn't that it's a secret debate or anything. The minutes can be published. I've actually no issue with it being recorded and then put online afterwards on the membership portal. But the idea behind that is that you can't have any outside interference within that debate, and that lost. One of the other CEC members, when asked for a response about why they voted that down, said it was because there was lots online about unelected bureaucrats, and there was a sentence within that amendment that talked about publishing the names of staff, which is very standard in Parliament. So MPs have to have their staff published. Again, I'm not massively wedded to that. So immediately I said, I'm absolutely fine to get rid of that sentence. If that's the sticking point, because they'd said that they agreed with a lot of it and they could vote for it if it just wasn't for that sentence. So I said, happy to change that. Let's just get rid of that. Or perhaps I could propose that we start voting in parts. And the response was still, no, not today. No, I'm like, we're still not going to vote for it, even if you do that. And after that, no response was given to any of the other amendments, which was disappointing. So we don't know why they voted against a lot of them. And I'm sorry, there were quite a few. So I can't really go through them all, but you can ask questions on them. Some of them were on limiting the chair's power and other things around the officer group, because I think as it stands with the current standing orders, which were passed on the Sunday meeting, I feel that a lot more power is being given to the officers group than I think the membership intended. This was meant to be collective leadership. Obviously, there have to be an officers group for practical reasons, but I think we didn't intend that to be something where they go away and run the party and run back, essentially turning the CEC into just a scrutiny committee. It should be the other way around. It should be the CEC instructing the officers group, not the officers group reporting back after the fact. So there was a few amendments on that. And I think throughout it was just felt, there was no time set aside at all for any democratic debate. And the mood and the atmosphere of the meeting was that, lots of tutting that we'd presented amendments, which I've honestly never had in a meeting like this before. Even when I was in the Labour Party, I was a councillor, sat in a party with people who I opposed internally, and also sat debating with Lib Dems, Conservatives, UKIP, Greens at time. And I think we all respected the idea that we have to have a debate. I mean, I'm sure people have set in their minds how they're going to vote, but I think it's good for the record, especially when you are essentially a delegate, you're elected by other people, by the membership. I think it's good for the record for people to say why they're voting for or against. And I think it would be true collective leadership for us to have disagreements, but to then perhaps come up with some sort of composited version of standing orders, some kind of compromise. And we were very willing to compromise on a lot of these points, some of them absolutely not. But things like I explained, like the revealing of the staff names, I wasn't particularly, that wasn't the hill I was going to die on, to be honest. And I think one that I was particularly disappointed with was actually in the officers' roles and responsibilities. So a whole paper was presented on that as well. And that was the one that was amended gone 11 p.m. at night. So it had no reference to what was amended, but just a new document was submitted. And we noticed, in fact, it was Candy Williams who noticed, that the difference was within the membership officer's role, they deleted a paragraph that talked about reaching out to diverse communities, including BAME communities and marginalised communities, and encouraging that within the membership, which despite the membership officer being unconstitutional, which I'll come to in a minute, I've no issue with the membership officer. I think it's probably a good idea if it's done right. And I thought that clause was a good one. So I was really surprised. And I think despite kind of, factional disagreements, I still cannot work out why that was deleted. So Candy Williams resubmitted that. She changed the word BAME to global majority and said that's one that's more modern and appropriate. Absolutely fine. And she resubmitted it, and it was voted down again. And as part of her 30-second speech, she said, this is almost exactly the same wording, except I've changed BAME to global majority. And I just want to know why this was deleted from the original text. And there was no response given. And we were told to be quiet by the chair, essentially. And then one of the other CEC members, Solma, tried to speak out. So she was on Zoom, And she was just trying to express that I think that she was personally very upset by this. And she got muted, and then the chair asked for the host capabilities for the Zoom from one of the staff members that was running it, so that she could keep her muted for longer as well, which yeah, it was quite upsetting to sit through. You know, a Muslim woman actually be muted when talking about the clause that is the one of the anti-racist clauses within the party that she's a member of and has been elected to be part of the collective leadership for. So that was the mood of the meeting. After that, we moved on to, and I'm probably missing a lot, I'm sorry. After that, we moved on to the actual officer elections. And in that report, we've detailed who won and who stood. I think notably Naomi nominated Louise Regan for chair and said that, you know, she'd be happy to vice chair underneath her. Jen Forbes was their candidate, who was already the interim chair, and as I've said earlier, I think was, you know, abusive of that position at times, and had set not an appropriate amount of time at all to discuss some of these important things. So we were not happy with Jen Forbes for a lot of reasons. And Naomi said that Louise could perhaps be a unifying candidate. Lots of people know Louise, and she's well respected amongst the movement. And I think that was a really good move from Naomi. I think it really showed, you know, that we are willing to work with a lot of them. And we'd like to get to know them on an individual basis and kind of see where we are aligned and where we're not. But Louise rejected that. I think she said that she didn't have time, which she actually then later stood for a political officer and won that. So anyway, so the rest of the names are in there. We all put someone forward ourselves, and obviously lost the entire thing. Sam Gus stood for membership officer. I seconded his nomination just to ensure he could stand. I don't actually think he voted for himself. And of course, Jeremy Corbyn got parliamentary leader. And parliamentary leader and membership officer were not in the original constitution. Again, I don't actually believe in a parliamentary leader, because that wasn't the point of the collective leadership. Membership officer, fine, but even so, it was not the hill I was going to die on. You know, if people want that, and if it would have been ratified by an all-member vote, which I actually think it would have been if that had been put forward, I think that would have gone through, and that's absolutely fine. I do feel that's probably, by and large, you can disagree with me and let me know what you feel, but by and large, I think it's probably the will of the membership to have Jeremy Corbyn as a parliamentary leader, and I'm absolutely fine with that. But what I'm not fine with is in the earlier past code of conduct, which I've not touched on, but included a lot around confidentiality. So we're all probably going to get told off the next meeting for sharing a lot of this information. I'm not sure, although it wasn't quite clarified what that means or what kind of panel that actually goes to if you are reported. But anyway, in the earlier code of conduct, it was really explicit that CEC members have to abide by the constitution, things passed at conference, and all member votes. And immediately, you know, it just feels like a two-tier code of conduct, because right there, in my opinion, is a breaking of that code of conduct by immediately going ahead and electing people to these positions. We knew it was going to happen, and I thought that was probably going to be the worst of the meeting, but it wasn't. After that, we had some staff reports. It was not that illuminating, to be honest. I think probably the most illuminating bit of it was currently the party spending £16,000 a month on staffing, plus £7,000 on staff seconded from the Peace and Justice Project. I think they've said in no uncertain terms that we can't name those staff. And there was a few other bits. Naomi raised a point about the Electoral Commission's, they released a report on donations to political parties, and she raised the point around the drama, which many have probably heard of, around the MOU funds, which Zara needs to transfer to the party, which is my understanding that she's tried quite a few times. And I think she sent Naomi on quite a bit of evidence around that, and it's been blocked, and she wants to transfer all the remaining funds as soon as possible. So Naomi's question was asking the newly elected treasurer for Dell, how he plans to handle that. Will he do it as soon as possible? But as soon as it was kind of mentioned, a point of order was raised that there's a conflict of interest here because Zara's in the room. I don't really accept that because I believe Jeremy is a director of your party as well, which, he's allowed to talk about the financial matters. But either way, it was then put to a vote that the discussion needed to end and be passed to the officer group. So I think we saw it straight away, our fears about serious matters being handed to the officer group, and the discussion on that was shut down. And then we finally then managed to move on to a couple other agenda items, which was an Iran statement that was passed unanimously, despite a couple of statements about Iran already being put out by your party since the CEC election, which I didn't disagree with the statement, but I did disagree that it didn't go through the newly elected CEC first. And then there was a local elections paper. So it was presented pretty briefly, and we were very strictly reminded that we were just a couple minutes until our deadline of finishing the meeting, which again, we'd said wasn't long enough anyway. And this was passed. And I think this is probably one of the better things that came out of the meetings, that at least that actually got things going. There was quite a few questions raised by us. Some of the things like, how will the campaign funding be managed? And it seems like candidates are maybe expected to self-fund. Who will sit on the appeals panel for candidates that are rejected by the standing office, by the officer group? How is this officer group going to manage this? Because that's what they were saying, that's where it's going to go. And it also seemed like there was a proposed administrative fee for candidates wanting to go through the selection process. I raised a question about it said that the officer group would facilitate a selection if multiple candidates wanted to stand, and I was raising the point that I think it should be the local CEC members that are involved in that process. None of these questions were answered, and we were told that the officer group will come back with an answer next time. So again, the same, I think, fear was realised. We did submit an amendment. So this was proposed by Grace Lewis and Megan Clark. One of the more disappointing bits of the meeting as well. And so there was a list of independent groups. We clarified that isn't exhaustive, and there'll be some form of affiliation strategy for local groups who want to stand candidates and get support and backing from your party. But one of our amendments to that was that if they do have any founding documents, that it's that they say that they're explicitly socialist, and that was voted down. And that was one of the ones that we did get an answer for, and the answer to that was that it was a purity test, which I don't agree with. I think perhaps that would be valid if we defined socialism. There are lots of different ways of defining it, and said that it has to be exactly this. This is how we define it, and this is how you have to define it as well. But the only thing that it said, and the only thing that we wanted, was for these groups to say that they're socialist. So that was battered away pretty quickly. And then the last agenda item, which was meant to be branch formation, we didn't get to, which we're very disappointed about. And I think, was it you, Matthew, mentioned about Scotland? So Niall did raise that. He'd raised that he sent a letter and not got a response. He was told that he will get a response as soon as possible from the chair. So yeah, we didn't get to branch formation, which I didn't actually think we were about to, because no papers were circulated for that agenda item. So I don't think there was much intention of that happening in the first place. And I didn't even think the 2 hour 45 minutes was enough for standing orders, never mind all the rest of it. Especially when I think, when you're saying that democracy is very important, which it is, and this is the foundational document that enables democracy, I think some care and attention should have gone to that. But if you're looking for silver linings, we do now have standing orders, we do now have a code of conduct, and we have some officers in position, and we do have the beginnings of a local election strategy, which should be worked on as a priority. And I'm sorry if I've just spoken at you. I don't know how long I've spoken for. I'm sorry if that was quite a while. My apologies. That's everything I can remember right now, and I'm happy to take questions.
Okay, thanks, Conrad. No, that was really very useful. Because we've basically been, left blind on this question. I mean, the main thing is, of course, they just won't speak to us. If you send them letters or emails or any of that stuff, they just don't answer.
We have the same email address, the CEC, so the way that we have to contact them is the same email address. I've never had a response from it.
Yeah. So that's really very helpful and gives us a great deal of assistance in terms of understanding what's going on. Does anybody want to ask a question or? Any hands up? All right. Ian, you'll need to unmute yourself.
Hi. Hi. All right. Thanks. Yeah, I'd like to say a couple more things about Scotland and Wales. Ask a couple of questions about that, and then maybe a couple of general questions. I put a little bit in the chat just now as well. That me and Niall both ran on a kind of overlapping democratic position in the election, and he won. It's a bit more complicated up here because there's also the national question. So the many endorsed candidate Jim Monaghan, there were some issues where I overlapped with him. We both didn't vote for the separation into a sister party vote, though I do know that was actually for consultation, so that did comfort me a bit that wasn't happening right away, because I was worried about if we did it right away, we'd never get the data because it'd be a different party. So Niall wanted to prioritise getting the money and data to Scotland. I didn't disagree with that, but I was also pushing, I think it's fair to say, more urgently than him, but it was in his programme too, for fairer representation for Scotland, because it's a complete nonsense in the metaphorical and literal person in the street, whether it's a lefty on a demo or an ordinary person I'm talking about in my personal life. We might not be into politics the way people on this call are. It's a complete nonsense that we've only got one and every single English region's got two. Actually makes it more unrepresentative than Westminster. Overrepresents England's already lopsided population advantage. So I'd have been pushing immediately for that. It seems Niall didn't really have time, to be fair, to push immediately for anything, given the way the agenda was handled. But I'm wondering about what the lay of the land is on that, to be corrected as soon as possible. If there's any arguments that could be put in favour of the current situation from the many, because to me it seemed like actually an easier one to resolve immediately than the data and money situation. And certainly in terms of this consultation that we've now voted to have on whether to become a separate sister party or not. Some people are saying, well, come the council elections, that's in a year, which was when we were saying we'll have the consultation until. So at least we'll be off next time, while still waiting for the data and the money and the ability to talk to each other for the next round of selections in up to a year's time. And I've been saying, well, if we're still waiting, if it's still at this stage in a full year's time, there'll be worse things to worry about than that. And I think actually to have the data, have the consultation fairly, we need to have the data, first of all, to talk to people about the consultation, to consult with them. And I'd argue that includes the 60,000 sign-ups who were enthused to sign up to a party launched by Jeremy Corbyn and Zara Sultana. Other specifically Scottish parties, such as even the Scottish Green Party, is a totally different party than the one that's got the wind in its sails down south, do exist. And so we should have that in order to do that. And Central can obviously share that consultation with us, but it should be done fairly and not railroaded in one way or the other. There might be different factions wanting to railroad it in one way or the other. So that's something that has to be discussed. We need to have the data. I'd argue the more up and running and not like this
Can you
first
wind it up there, comrade?
is come a year's time. That also would give us something to compare and contrast on its own merits, as opposed to this is terrible, let's get out of it. So all of those things about Scotland, I think apply to your report there. I'd just like to quickly ask why you think this thing about BAME was first put in and then taken out. It seems to me, if anything, TM policy, given what they said about repairing links with the Muslim community, which actually, on the face of it, the words, at least I agreed with, that was one of their better planks. And we saw what happened in Manchester, obviously, with the almost felt sorry for the right attacking the Muslim community for supporting party led by a gay Jewish man because they're conservative. Bizarre position. So why do you think it was amended to take it out? I think by the time it was being voted on, it's just everyone voting on factional lines and not conceding anything. Though there was one thing I think that was
can you
sorry.
Okay.
Yeah. And finally, just on the parliamentary thing, I thought there was a post of parliamentary convener. What happened to that? It seems that one side was saying have parliamentary leader and add them to the officers group, and the other was saying collectivise it completely, which just shows how polarised it is. What about the original position, or am I wrong in remembering that, of having a convener?
Okay, thanks, Ian. Eric.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Sophie, thanks for that excellent report. One of the things that I'm a bit puzzled about, Sophie, is myself and another colleague, Phil, that's on this call. We were representatives. We were in a group called the Social Justice Party, and we sent representatives to the collective back in the day for comrades that know about that. And Carrie Murphy met with the Social Justice Party in October last year. And Carrie explained to us that the people that were running your party then were a group that she called the executive of approximately 12 people. And she didn't give the identity of those people for the same reasons that you were given. But the thing that she absolutely emphasised was that everyone involved was a volunteer and there was no paid staff whatsoever. So I'm a bit puzzled. I think you said the figure of £16,000. So I'm quite puzzled where that came from. And I'm also quite concerned. I think most of us on this call wanted three things from this party. We wanted it to be committed to socialism, we wanted it to be democratic, and we wanted it to be run in a fair and transparent way. And I'm a bit puzzled how these executives, that's now called the Secretariat, who elected them? How were they appointed? What was the equal opportunities process for that? So that's just an observation that I find quite worrying. Me question really, Sophie, for you is, did I see or did I hear or read in one of the reports that a full handover from this secretive, and I will use the word secretive because we don't know who they are, that this executive or this secretariat, am I right in thinking that you as an elected CEC member aren't going to get a full handover for them? A full handover from them is only going to go to the officers group. Is that right? I'm just mindful on the final point is that I think you're doing a great job, and I'm one of the 524 people that voted for you in North Yorkshire. And when they mute you or Solmer, who had 497 party members vote for her, You know, you guys are being good reps, and they're not just voting you, not just muting you, they're ignoring the people that voted for you as well.
Thanks, Eric. Do you want to come back on those, Sophie?
Sorry, I was just writing them down because they're quite in-depth questions. Okay. So on Ian's points about Scotland, Niall managed to intervene a couple of times by just interrupting or calling points of orders, because there was no time at all given to Scotland or for anybody to actually even raise, you know, these are our priorities going forward. It would have been good to have a discussion about what our priorities are. And absolutely, I think it's really obvious that Scotland and Wales need 2 reps each. I know you may have some disagreements with Niall at times, but that is a problem of having 1 rep, isn't it? You know, that it's just going to be representing 1 point of view. The thing to mention on that though is Niall's wife had a baby, I think the day before the meeting. So he was still in the hospital with the newborn during the meeting, and a couple of times had to leave. So if you do read the report and you're wondering sometimes why the votes for some of the amendments don't always add up, sometimes there's one missing, it's because of that. So, you know, solidarity to Niall. It was very hard to zoom in from the hospital. Yeah, I'm quite dedicated, but I don't think I would have done that, bless him. But he, you know, he did keep mentioning it, and he did press the point of, you know, he'd written a letter and he'd not got any response. So he's still trying with that, and I think he's had an indication that he might get a response in that the chair said, "Can I call you today?" That's not particularly great information, but that's where we're at. And yeah, obviously, I think you need the data before you have a consultation. It's not a consultation if you're not speaking to the members. So completely agree on some of the things that you've raised there. On the question of parliamentary leader / convener or it being fully collective, I am sorry, my brain's really fried and I can't remember. It was my understanding, and I could be wrong, and I would double check this before answering again, is that it was completely collective, and that the 2 slates were proposing something slightly different. So I think leader is actually quite different to convener when you think about how that actually operates. But it's my understanding, and again, I could be speaking out of turn because my brain is fried, but that grassroots left slate were proposing a parliamentary convener. This is probably one of the only points that I differed from the wider grassroots left slate on, although I don't think anyone was wedded to any of the ideas particularly. And I did end up signing a statement that I also wouldn't vote in a parliamentary convener. Again, it's not one of those things that I think is the be all and end all. I think what I actually think is the key point here is having a collective leadership. I actually think when you've got, and hopefully eventually we will do, or that's the original plan, to get quite a few MPs in Parliament, and at that point you'd need some kind of link, I think, between you know, when you've got multiple MPs, you'd need that link. I don't think that should be part of the officers group. I think that should be a little bit how it works in parliamentary systems now, and from what I remember when I was on council, where we would elect delegates to go to the councillor assemblies, the local government authority, or whatever it's called now. It's changed name a few times, but I think it should work maybe something similar to that. But I think that's probably where some of the confusion has come in. Eric asked about the paid staff, and I'm not going to name any of the paid staff, but they did say that they've been paid staff. I don't know how long for. On the Tuesday meeting, we were told by one of them that they were on temporary contracts. I assume that's the £16,000 that's being spent every month. They're on the temporary contracts, and that person said that they're awaiting sign-off from the CEC to renew that or decide what they're doing. That obviously hasn't happened. And then there was the people who were seconded from Peace and Justice Project. But yeah, they were paid staff as far as I can tell, so I'm confused as well. And yeah, of course, democratic and accountable was absolutely the aim going forward. And is a full handover going to happen with the officers? Yeah, I assume it's going to happen with the officers. If there's going to be much handover at all, we're now going to be told after the fact, which is what we didn't want to happen, but we'll be told after the fact, is my understanding. And I think you're right to raise the point that they're ignoring voters by muting any of us. And I would also apply that to the many CEC members who, I mean, at one point, I don't want to be petty by raising this, but at one point, and I said that the amendments weren't circulated in advance and we had 30 seconds to present them. At one point, one of the other members, after voting against the amendment, which I obviously agreed with and thought was perfectly reasonable, whispered that they'd not heard any of that or didn't understand any of that. And they said it in, a bit of a chuckling way. And I pointed it out and said, you've just voted against something which you're saying you didn't hear or understand. You don't understand what you've voted on, which is something I've been to so many meetings with various people of political persuasions, and I've never had anybody openly declare that before. And just, people do vote in blocks and they do vote in factions, but to do it in that manner, I thought was really audacious, and I've never seen that before. And one of the other things I pointed out to them was, people voted for you, people voted for you, people knew and trusted you, and now you've just voted on something that you don't understand. And if your members asked you about that, you actually don't know what the amendment is and you don't know the reasoning behind it. I'm sure they'll have thought of the reason by the time anyone gets to ask, but at that point they didn't. I think that was all the questions, and I'm happy to answer some more. I do have to leave at 8, but apart from that, I'm good.
Yeah, thanks very much, comrade. Nigel.
Yeah, the meeting scheduled to end at 8, Sophie. Great that you could come in, and solidarity and sympathy with you for this experience. It must have been very tough. There's no attempt at any kind of consensus or any kind of pragmatism in these first 2 meetings. It's very, very concerning. And to hear that the tone was poor, and I do trust what you're saying, is really appalling, especially at the beginning of an organisation, been involved in these kind of things for a long time, setting things up, and tone is really, really important to get that right. And lack of communication, open communication, it's absolutely incredible, that you can't openly communicate with other CEC colleagues. It's mind blowing. I haven't seen the code of conduct, obviously, but the code of conduct should have been one of the first things that was implemented as a draft code of conduct, obviously. But if that's all about if that's all about lack of transparency and stopping people sharing information, that's completely against democracy. Information should be openly accessible to everybody in the organisation, and minutes of the meetings and these kind of things should be available to members. I mean, after all, we're members. I mean, you can redact certain confidential things, but I mean, basically, we should be open and accessible to minutes of those meetings. So as for it being member-led and all the rest of it, doesn't seem to be involving members very much. What I would propose, and I know I asked Sophie to talk about this, but there's 2 thoughts I have. One is I've talked to people in Yorkshire and Humber about a regional group, trying to get the proto branches together to set up a regional group that represents the proto branches and inviting the CEC delegates to talk to us. I've mentioned this elsewhere, and the idea then would be we'd be able to kind of input to the CEC comrades in a more direct way what's going on in our branches. Proto branches, if we're able to set a branch up, because I have to say, it's been, our proto branch was one of the biggest branches according to the unofficial figures coming out, but it's been hemorrhaging people in terms of active involvement over all of this crisis, over all this period of building, because it's been seen as a difficult situation. I wouldn't want to talk too much about that. So there's that. And personally, what I'll be doing is giving a lot of thought to the next conference. and challenging some of this stuff there. I mean, we tried to put our own amendments in to the last conference, and one of them was to propose 3 members for Scotland and 2 for the English regions and 2 for Wales, to take account of what Ian said, because it's a nation, Scotland. It should be overrepresented, not underrepresented. This is absolutely shocking. And those decisions are just mind blowing, in my view. And the stuff about restricting meeting, I'm sorry to go on, but the stuff about restricting meeting times, why did they stand for the CEC if they couldn't give up one Sunday a month to this work and 2 hours a week to this work? This is mind blowing, comrades, absolutely mind blowing. And they shouldn't be there if that's the case. And if they're not paying attention, they shouldn't be there either. It's very concerning. So it's up to the members. We've got to try and build something out of this mess and hope that we can keep people together and try. But I mean, trying to build a branch when we don't know who's in it is proving very, very difficult. And people are just floating away, drifting away. Thanks, Sophie.
Yeah, thanks, Nigel. Nora.
Yeah, I've got quite a lot of questions. Sophie, do you know how many members there are in Yorkshire and Humber? And the other regional officer, CEC members, do they know how many members in their area? Because the rules say that if CEC elected members are not acting as the membership would expect, 40% of the total number in their constituency can remove them. And that goes for the public office holders as well, which means that there would be just under 13,750 people that would have to come together to boot out the 4 of them, in which might be a possibility. But that's one question. The rules also say about staff that they report to the officers, but they are also accountable to the CEC members. It doesn't say how, but it says more widely. And it says that twice in 2 sections of the rules, or the Constitution, I should say. And as far as the leader in Parliament, how on earth can Jeremy Corbyn take that role when he is in Parliament as an independent MP? He is not in Parliament as a Your Party MP. There is only one person who's got that, and that's Sarah.
Okay, thanks, Nora. So, sorry, Sophie, do you want to come back on that?
Yeah, absolutely.
It's really hugely appreciated, this.
No, don't worry. I'm sorry if there's just a delay when I'm writing. So on Nigel's point about regional grouping and inviting CEC delegates, I think that would be a good idea. I've not had chance because it's just been non-stop over the past few days, but I am hoping, well, I will just set up a CEC email address as well, rather than you all sort of randomly contacting me on WhatsApp in case things get missed. So I think that'd be good, so that even if I'm not in attendance to a meeting, you can discuss and send things in, as a branch or however you want to. But very up for meeting regionally as well. Yeah, I think that would be an obvious way forward. Why did people stand for the CEC if they can't give up the time? I think it's a really good question, and it's also one of the things that they're using as a battering ram against us. One of the things was trying to accuse us of filibustering, which, when you've got 30 seconds to give a speech for an amendment, is just one of the most outrageous things ever. We just care about democracy. Absolutely wanted to get to the other things. But one of the other things, so one of the answers that we did get to one of the proposals on making the meetings more, setting dates for them, having them being regular, saying every month we meet at this time for this amount of time, or whatever that looks like, one of the reasons that they actually gave, which really, really just made me grow internally, was, oh, some of us have caring responsibilities and etc. etc. And to make it accessible, we can't commit that amount of time, which just really rubbed me up the wrong way because I do as well. I've got two really young toddlers, you know, they're age 2 and 3. And actually that's exactly why I'd like this to be regular so I can plan around it. It was also one of the points, and I know that they're going to keep hammering that home and try to say that we're, you know, part of the idea of the CEC was to allow ordinary members a voice on the Central Executive Committee. I mean, I often reject some of that because I think the point of the ordinary voice comes through the delegates. So it's meant to be that it's not meant to be that just anyone can be on the CEC, although obviously they can, that those delegates are representing more than just themselves. That is the point of a delegate system and having an executive committee, that they're meant to be the voice of all those ordinary members, people who couldn't get to things like CEC meetings, that, you know, you volunteer to do it and you do it for a term. And that's the point of it. And I know that they're going to keep raising this. And it really does just rub me up the wrong way because I really want some regularity so I can plan. And it was the same when we said that we'd like a full day meeting on the Tuesday meeting. Some of the responses were things like, oh, some of us have already booked travel and childcare, which begs the question, how? Because we were only told about, you know, the meeting an hour before. So how did you book childcare and traveling when I've got no chance unless you found out about it before me? But yeah, that's exactly why I want to know when the meeting schedules are, because I would find it very inaccessible to constantly be told, you know, come to London in 2 days' time, and here are the minutes. So here is the agenda. Less than 24 hours notice. I just I've definitely got time to dedicate things to the CEC, and I will do that. But I can't promise that I can respond to things within 24 hours when I've got the kids. And obviously it's going to be the same for Niall. Now he's just got a newborn. So that is something that's going to be continuously brought up to us. And I think you're right, Nigel, to say it's up to the members to keep this going now. I think one of the greatest things that's come out of your party being announced is so many different groups and parties and people of different political persuasions finally coming together, which is what is needed. And you know, that cat is out of the bag now. We've met up, we've got past some of those sticking points that people have had for years, decades, you know, some people a century or more. And Eric mentioned earlier, you know, that the point of this is the thing that actually unites us, I think, is that we want a mass workers' party, we want a socialist party, and we want it to be democratic and accountable. And we want to be able to have that healthy debate within that, you know, even where we will probably disagree on several policy points. But the point that we do agree on is that we want that debate, and we want that party to exist. So I think it's up to the members to keep that going and, you know, to submit things to conference. I think it's going to be very difficult to keep people motivated right up until the next conference, whenever that is. I think it should probably be before 12 months since the last one. I think it should be within the same party season as all the others. That would make the most sense. So maybe we can get that for September. We'll see. That'll have to be something that comes up pretty soon. And I don't think that they'll manage to stitch this one up as much as the last one with the room of disappearing amendments. I mean, I could be wrong, but I don't think it will manage to be as bad as the last one, especially when they've also made a promise to set up branches. I think that will be in a completely different way to the way I see branches being set up. But I would just like branches to be set up as long as it's done. And like you say, we've got that membership base and we've got that data from all of those people who have signed up. I think that's going to be key. Nora, you asked how many Yorkshire members are there? Sorry, I can't remember off the top of my head, but I think we did get a breakdown. It's on the Your Party website, as I understand it, of active verified members in each region. I can't get it for you tonight because after this I'm busy. If you want to have a look, if not, I'll try and find it for you at a later time. But we can find out, and that information is available. If you manage to get to it before me, let me know, and I will try and find it, because I'm pretty certain we had at some point a list of not their actual names, but a list of how many verified members there were. And staff being accountable to the CEC widely in the Constitution. Yep. And I think I think they now think that the standing orders and the code of conduct override the constitution. They are meant to be accountable to the CEC widely. But the mechanism to actually enforce that, you know, if they mute us in meetings, is going to be very difficult. And I think you're right to mention that Zara's the only your party MP.
Okay, thanks, Sophie. Phil, you need to unmute yourself, comrade. Phil. All right. Well, while he gets himself sorted out, I would say also, I mean, we had a meeting last night in our branch, and the problem we've got, of course, is that we're trying to stand for the Scottish Parliament, and we haven't got any notion of who all the members are, and we've got about a week to get it together, and they refuse to speak to us. You know, so people are saying, okay, the only thing we can do is get somebody to stand as an independent, because that's, you know, it's just, you know, the way that it's been put together is such that it's you know, just obstructing the whole thing. And actually, of course, the net effect, of course, is to assist Farage. I mean, what these people are doing is actually sabotaging the organisation to the assistance of the far right.
Ah,
All right, here we are.
I finally found the button to unmute myself on my phone. Sorry about that. I've always used my laptop before. So yeah, I mean, it's really interesting what Sophie's been saying, and I think she's picked up loads of really important points that illustrate what's going on in your party. And I think everyone's been asking great questions. Like as Eric mentioned, like we tried to get involved very early, like 18 months ago, when it was the collective discussions. And right from the start, Carrie Murphy has been controlling what happens. And like she's got record in Unite of being incredibly stubborn and prepared to do whatever is necessary to get her way. And I just don't feel like this is a democratic organization. If it walks like a duck and quacks like a duck, you've got to recognize what it is. All these rules and standing orders, if things don't go their way, they'll just ignore them and find an excuse to ignore them. They've centralized power in this officers group, so they can just do stuff without even telling the rest of the CEC. Everyone on the many slate owes their position to Carrie Murphy, and they know it because she chose who was on the slate. It's an authoritarian organization, and that shouldn't be acceptable to socialists. And I know people want to hope it'll get better, but they stitched up the conference by controlling the agenda. They stitched up the elections by rigging the rules in their favor, and it worked. So why would they not do it again next year to get their way? So I'm afraid my question is how people think this is going to get better. Like everyone's been kind of hoping they'd get this membership data, but it's become a way of controlling the branches to keep people hanging on that eventually you'll get this membership data. I think, I mean, I know the good proto branches have been trying to organize anyway and building their own social media and their own membership data. But I just think it can't happen soon enough that people recognize how bad this is. And it's become, like most people have walked away from this organization. 90% of the people who are interested have already walked away. So what we've got left is just a way of controlling people and gaslighting them and holding up the development of something better. that is actually what we want. So yeah, I mean, I guess it's not a great question, but my question is, how do people see this improving, or where do we go? Thanks.
Okay, thanks, Phil. Anybody else? Take Ian.
Very quick counterpoint to Phil, which is that they've mainly walked away to the Greens, which are even less of an answer than the issues, your party, for all the issues that we've been discussing tonight. And so, yeah, the question of that, I think there's a justification for an explicitly socialist party's existence, and a real worry about the mass split from Labour simply being a pipeline to the Greens. But also, we have to box clever with them now, because they are currently bigger than us. And what happened in Manchester was a big positive, beating Labour and Reform. But at the same time, Phil, that's what the 90% of that 90%, if you want to put it that way, have probably walked away too, and it isn't the answer either. And we have to provide one, because even if their limitations aren't as spectacular as Starmer's betrayals or your party,
Can you be brief, comrade? Because we've not got a lot of time left
at the present time. Yeah, I'd argue that we still need a socialist party too.
All right, thanks, Ian. Goran.
Hello, sir. Yeah, thanks a lot. A very quick question and a little bit speculative, and I appreciate if there isn't an answer for this. How do you think, we're talking about stitch-ups, how do you think they might try and stitch up the branches? In other words, I think they will try and sideline activists, and they will try and not destroy but disempower branches that are active. That, you know, I mean, my branch in Bradford isn't that active, but I do know that there's lots of branches that are. Now, I only ask because I probably spend too much time on Facebook and looking at the Your Party groups, but during the CEC election period, someone who has got elected to the CEC, and this person belongs to the many, there was I don't know if comrades saw it, but there was a bit of a hullabaloo on Facebook because apparently she'd said something, apparently in jest, that if you're a chairman in a proto branch now, when we set these branches up properly, you're not going to be allowed to stand. Now, this person has now been elected to the CEC, and she tried to say that it was just a joke and it was in a private meeting. I don't know if the meeting was in a branch. She didn't really apologize for it, and then sort of to make matters worse, she said that, yeah, I sort of think that's the way we should go with branches, you know. I hope that makes sense, and that is my question. Thank you very much.
All right, thanks. Carol?
Yeah, thank you. I read the report that Naomi circulated with great despondency, but not surprised really, because a lot of what I'm hearing sort of is playing out in our proto branch. And my question, because I know we're coming near to the end of the meeting, my question, I don't know if Sophie can or will want to answer, is how long is it before Zara says, I've had enough of this nonsense, and says, we need a real grassroots, proper socialist organisation instead of what we have now with echoes of momentum and Stalinism, and really playing around with the Peace and Justice Party some sort of soggy nonsense, because people are leaving for the Greens. We all know we need a Socialist Party and the Greens are not it, but we know that, but a lot of people don't know it, and that's why they're seeking that solution. So really, the chips are down now, aren't they? We've got to get serious about it, and I'm afraid I don't think that your party is going to be the answer. I'm not saying I'm leaving. I'm just saying that I'd be looking for something stronger and more serious. Okay,
thanks, comrade. Dinos, you have to be quick though. Unfortunately, there's always this way this works. Everybody, you get a big rush of people at the end.
Well, I'm listening to all this from Cyprus. It all seems so disappointing and so problematic. I mean, we have been waiting for this moment to come to have something built in the center of the developed world, and we are just seeing that everything is going wrong. I mean, we have to decide what we are doing. If we are not leaving your party and if we are not deserting it, then we should start building in the branches. I mean, it's bound. We have to understand that all these difficulties and all these petty quarrels are going to happen, and we have to face them, and we have to make sure that we build whatever we can at grassroots and see what we can do. I mean, I cannot accept that we're just here complaining about somebody who is trying to take over the leadership and who is trying to control everything. Of course, they are going to try to do that. Everybody is going to try to do that. It's up to us, I think, to try to stop them, and we have to go forward. I mean, I just next to us we have this bloody war going on, and we have to bring ourselves together. I mean, we cannot do it without the British, without the European, without the American people building these workers' parties. If we are not going to do this, we go back to Starmer and we try to face him in his part. But I think we are just a step past that. Let's not destroy this now in the beginning. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, comrade. That's useful. Anyway, right, Sophie.
Thank you. I'll try and
I know.
address
Pilot all in your direction.
No, it's fine. I think Phil was I think it was Phil first. And I can't mention any staff names. But we were talking about people who have stitched up elections, and how will it get better? I also feel like I can't answer that question at the minute. I think the only way is kind of, as I've mentioned, is the cat is out of the bag on what unites us. The progress that we made last year was really incredible, and something that hasn't happened. I know I'm only 30, but not in my lifetime, and not something that I was hopeful to happen. I mean, I was hopeful, but not something that I would have bet money on happening. That all these groups and people would actually come together. In the Sheffield branch of your party, we were in a meeting with people who I've respected, but we've been arguing for the past 10 years, in the Trades Council. And it was good to finally say, I think we agree on this. And everybody was there saying, let's make a go of it. And I think so much work has been put into this that it would be a really big decision to leave. But but also it's not that I think so much work has been put into this party. I think so much work has been put into those principles of democracy and accountability and coming together and coming together on what unites us. And I don't mean that in a wishy-washy way, that they are just the core principles of democracy and socialism and accountability. And I think if we can remember that, we've got a way forward, and people at least have some of those connections. I know some of the WhatsApps have been really fraught, but we do still have those, and we do still have those meetings going on, and that is the only way that I can see it getting better. As for the conference and for the kind of the way out with the CEC as well, for me, I think we really need to keep an eye on the next couple of CEC meetings. I think these initial ones are the most important. Part of that is why we chose to publish such an in-depth report. I mean, we were going to be publishing reports anyway, but there was a bit of a, is this too long? Do people just want a summary? Potentially they do. There's a bit of a summary at the start, but part of that is I think it is up to members to hold their CEC members to account and say, why did you vote against XYZ? And say that actually, we're not just a passive membership. And we'll keep up that pressure. I think some of these people elected to the CEC really thrive, and this is me again, a bit of this is me being quite mean, but I think people sometimes really thrive on their own ego, and walking into a room of people who are suddenly against them and they were on a high of being elected to something is something that I think can change people's minds and pressure them in the other direction. They obviously do owe that position that they've got to one person who created the slate. And that's a whole nother issue that I think we could sit here talking about for an hour, the conflict of interest there between people who are running the party as well as running factional elements of your party, and that would not be allowed in any other grouping as well. I know that because my partner used to work for the Labour Party, and when I stood for selection in the general election, he was pulled in to a disciplinary because I think he'd liked my selection page on Facebook. He was being very careful and genuinely was not helping me in that selection, but he'd liked it on Facebook and was pulled in about that. And that was how seriously they were taking it. I'm sure it was one rule for one and for him and one rule for another. But that's how it should be. I didn't disagree with that. That was absolutely fair. He was employed by that party and I was standing in a selection, and that was absolutely fair. And then there was a question from Goran about how they might stitch up branches. You were right to mention one of the CAC members, and it was Hannah Hawkins, and she was also the one who declared that she didn't understand or didn't know what she was voting on, or she didn't hear it or whatever. So it's the same person. I don't mind mentioning that at all. And we've been having a few debates about if we should have been mentioning how people are voting and what they're saying in the meetings, which is standard practice, and I'm all for. But it seems that naming people is going to be the stick that they want to beat us with. So at the minute, I'll try and stay in there as long as possible. But how will they stitch the branches up? I think there's definitely a difference of opinion. For me, I think the proto branches should be recognised as far as possible. I know there are a few areas where there are multiple proto branches, and there needs to be some kind of meeting to facilitate that. But for the most part, at least the proto branches that I have known and visited, it seems pretty okay. Maybe I'm quite lucky in Sheffield in that we just have one, and it's got people from all sorts of different walks of lives and groups and political backgrounds, and we've managed to get on all right to make that. I think they should be recognised, and obviously the many don't, and I think it's right. I think someone put in the comments that they will probably try and set those branches up and not give them access to the membership data. I think that's really key so that you can do what you like with it. Obviously, don't support another party with it. There's got to be some rules, but absolutely you should be able to invite them to events and campaign meetings as and when you want. Carol asked how long until Zara starts a new party. I don't think I can answer that because I don't know Zara's mind on this. There was a petition floating around asking her to start a new party, but I do know that she had no part in that and is not about to and does not want to start a new party. But I think I don't think we should rely on people to start parties anyway. And I think part of this is, why we want this collective leadership so much is that we can't rely on individuals to be leaders. I mean, up until this, I thought Jeremy Corbyn, I've always supported him. And my opposition to him being sole leader was not actually even anything to do with him personally. It was just that he's not going to be around forever. And there are very few politicians, if any, that we can rely on permanently to lead this movement. And it really is better being a member-led party, which I think the majority of the members and people who did originally sign up do agree with. And it was Dinos was talking at the end, and he mentioned a little bit about leaders, and I just wish we weren't so obsessed with leaders. And I think we need to take confidence in ourselves to even, to run this party as it is, and to keep up these connections that we've made. But I just wanted to echo that it is so disappointing that we've been waiting for this for so long. Groups across Europe seem to manage this to an extent, and we seem to be failing at it. And it's very disappointing. And I'll never forget this. I hope it was not a once in a lifetime opportunity that was squandered. And if it is, I will never forget it. And I don't think people should be forgiven for putting themselves above the movement here. This isn't about kind of who gets paid positions, who gets the media spotlight. I think that the ultimate aim of everybody involved in this movement should be making it worse. Sorry, not making it worse, making it better, making it work. The aim for us should be, for setting up a mass democratic socialist party, not just for the point of because we want a party and some of us enjoy politics and like talking at meetings and like, the feeling of being elected. It should be to get socialism in our lifetime, and that should be the ultimate aim. And everything you do should be with keeping that in mind, and will this further the cause? And any deviation from that, I don't think we can accept, and we can't accept those that do deviate.
Okay. Yeah, well,
can I just clarify that? I mean by people who are seeking power, not members. Members,
Sure.
I accept a wide range of people in the membership. But when people seek power, and they are standing for positions, that is where their heart should lie.
Okay. Well, I'll just say again, thank you very much for that. It's been hugely useful.
Thank you for having me. Thank you so much. I think this was a really good idea to set this up. So thank you for having me, and solidarity to you all.
Take on everybody's questions and so on, yeah. And hopefully everybody will go away and think that see that their questions have been answered, or if not, they can raise them. Again, we'll try and sort them out. So yeah, and I think as has been said in the chat, you're obviously a great representative, and well worth. Just a shame we don't have more people on this leading committee, the CEC, of your standing and ability.
Thank you. That's very kind. Thank you.